Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. My name is Dean Jones, and today, this is Season 1, Episode 7. It's our interview with Roxana Jullapat. Roxana is the owner of Friends and Family, a bakery in Los Angeles, as well as the author of a brand new cookbook, Mother Grains, Recipes for a Grain Revolution. It was a really lovely conversation, and I think you'll learn a lot about the cookbook and Roxana's career, as well as her bakery in Los Angeles. It's a wonderful conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned. I want to welcome today to our podcast Roxana Jullapat, author of Mother Grains, Recipes for the Grain Revolution. Roxana, I want to thank you for appearing on our podcast. I want to thank you very much for being here today. How did you come to work in baking? Did you always want to be a professional chef? And was this your first career?
Living in Costa Rica, where I spent a lot of time, basically all my childhood and young adulthood. And I graduated with a bachelor's in journalism and thought that I would probably write about subjects that were related to agriculture, food economy, social change around food, food injustice, food justice. And in going through that and researching those topics, I just kind of like fell in love with cooking all over again, because I've cooked since I was very young. And it felt like maybe this is something I could do. I thought I would do it for just a short period of time, sort of go to cooking school, learn a little bit more about food so I could talk about food with more confidence in my writing. And I just happened to never go back to writing until I wrote this cookbook, or reporting or journalism in any form beyond, those externships and first office jobs I had when I was very young and still in college.
What are some of the early memories you have that influenced you becoming a baker and a chef and working with food?
I come from a family of people that are definitely cooks. Not My parents were into cooking, but they were perhaps more functional about it. Like, we were 5 kids, so let's get these kids to eat. Let's get these kids fed. We also were there was a wide range of tastes in my house. There were kids that were very picky eater, like my sister, and there were kids that ate everything, like myself and my little brother. So there was not a lot of culinary fascination per se. Maybe my dad had more of an inclination. My mom definitely tried not to cook as much as possible, as much as she couldn't help it. But in our house, we always had domestic workers that would come and help my parents with child rearing. And with them, I learned a lot, actually. I learned how to use a rice cooker, or that you have to sort beans before you boil them, for example. And all of these women, because they were all women, were refugees from Central American countries that were fleeing like horrific conflicts. So you learn a lot about food, and you learn about, war and refugees and how important it is to provide asylum to refugees. So it was an all-encompassing education to have these people around. Then there were the grandparents and the aunts. And those people were really, really into cooking and fantastic cooks. And the occasions in which we would cook together were always communal and great parties, lunches that would last until the wee hours of the night and things like that.
What were some of your early memories of cooking with your family that you remember fondly?
Well, I remember making pancakes. Imagine you're the middle sister of 5 kids. You're gonna learn how to make pancakes, because by the time you make pancakes for all of those people, you can make a pancake. My stepmom has a fabulous recipe that is sweet corn lasagna that we all learn how to make, and I actually kind of got really good at it. That's definitely that definitely holds a soft spot in my heart.
Can you tell me about what restaurants and bakeries you came to work in before you opened Friends and Family?
Well, it's been 20 years in this business, so I've definitely set foot in a lot of kitchens. The most notable, perhaps, was like the first one where it was a small cafe. Actually, it still exists here, very close to where I lived at the time. It's in this neighborhood in LA called Los Feliz. I could walk to work, which is really rare in this town. And I just, you know, push my resume, very, very tiny resume under the door right before the cafe opened. They hired me the next day, and I just came to make salads and desserts under a screaming French chef, like that stereotype that you think exactly that guy. And in time, the kitchen was totally chaotic and the bistro was tiny and there was a lot to do and not a great distribution of labor, but I find myself making desserts and plating desserts. So I thought to myself, if I'm going to make desserts, I should find a really, really great kitchen to make desserts in. And I applied to Campanile, which at the time was owned by Nancy Silverton and Mark Peel. I trained with her and her pastry chef at the time, which is this fantastic woman who's now my friend. Her name was Kimberly Boyce, and she owns a beautiful bakery in North Portland in Oregon. It's called Bake Shop. And I worked under them for 2 years. Then I migrated to other kitchens, most notably worked with Suzanne Goen. She owned Lucques at the time here in West Hollywood and AOC. Eventually, we moved to Portland, Oregon for a little bit, my husband and we work at Clark Lewis, one of those, um, farm to table, cool places to work in. We came back to LA. We work at Amazo, another farm to table, um, stubborn restaurant that just lasted for like 20 years until they closed. Um, then we opened a place where my husband and I were partners. It was called Cooks County. We run it for like 3 to 4 years, totally burned out. We decided to take a break. We took a couple of years, put our heads together, and we're like, what is the place that we want to do next? And we opened a bakery.
How has the quarantine for coronavirus affected your restaurant, friends, and family?
Like almost everybody, the hardest part was to know what to do, right? To make a decision that seemed right for the future of the business, for your employees, and for your own health, right? So our first step was to close. We didn't know for how long, but it was very evident that we weren't gonna bring enough income to keep the doors open because sales dipped overnight, including a very healthy wholesale business that we maintain to this day. So we closed for 10 weeks, but I stayed in the kitchen baking bread for a couple of wholesale customers and for ourselves. And then we started to offer our breads and pastries in boxes and takeout over the weekend. Also, my husband, who's the chef, would make like roasts and things like that that people could reheat at home. 10 weeks later, 8 to 10 weeks later, we decided that we would reopen, following the protocol at the time with the city of LA. And it was a very confusing and depressing time because you're used to open the doors and having this bustling and really, really energetic place. And all of a sudden it's like really, really quiet. Even customers that came to support us daily would seem very hesitant and afraid. Um, Everybody's still getting accustomed to wearing masks and all this social distance stuff. But by the fall, we found our groove. The bakery, it has been so busy ever since. Um, we've realized that baked goods, bread, and these items that are affordable and very nurturing and sort of comforting have sustained a lot of people in our community through this rough patch. And by then we were fully staffed all over again. The holidays were very, very busy and it almost felt like if it wasn't for the mask, everything was fine. And this year we've definitely experienced a shift in energy. Things are really turning the corner. Having a new president in the White House really helped the morale of the city. It's a very, very liberal city. And we all feel that there's an incredible sense of community, especially in my immediate neighborhood. The movement to get everybody vaccinated and vaccinate ourselves has been very, very strong. So yeah, right now I feel very positive about the business and the country and the city. Everything seems to have turned around.
I read in an interview that you're an advocate for garden-based education. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, so my interest in garden-based education started actually during the Obama years, many years ago. Um, and I'm gonna really reveal my age, I guess, here, because at the time I was like professionally fairly satisfied. I knew what I liked, I knew where I stood, like what were my strengths, what was my niche, and who was my audience, and I felt really rewarded in that respect. But restaurants are really, really grinding work environments, and there's very little sense of connection with the community at large, um, and also it's a business that doesn't necessarily produce enough revenue that you can say, oh, let's take all the time in the world to engage in other hobbies and endeavors, right? However, volunteering at gardens around town seem really cool. And all my outreach in general until very recently when things got really bad, it felt to me that I should work on things that had a future rather than charities that had a palliative effect, right? So I was like, yeah, sure, I could raise funds and run for Alzheimer's, for example, when I was running marathons, but I could also just go and help this tiny little school, Title I school, build their own garden and sort of like participate in these activities where you connect with the kids and their parents and their teachers and teach them a little something about cooking if that was the occasion, if we taught a class or and then I connected with the local chapter of the Edible Schoolyard, and which is a really cool little school. It has 4 campuses. It happens to be a charter, and the group who have run it from the get-go. Like they founded the project and they keep doing it to this day. And by now we've been friends for like over a decade. And these women were teaching with like the little bit that they had with a little I mean the program is very prestigious in the Bay Area, right? But like here they are with like using a hose to wash the dishes and are like, okay, what do you guys need? How can we make you, how can we get you money so that you can finance the things that you need? So I started a fundraiser, and that's what I did, and I did it for 5 consecutive years, and we donated probably over the years has been close to 10 grand to like small businesses around town, and it gives me an opportunity to involve other fellow bakers. We do bake sales and things like that. Now bake sales are everywhere and in every format, but at the time we convinced the Hollywood Farmers Market, one of the busiest here in Los Angeles, to let us have a booth right in the center on a Sunday on either spring or fall, and just like sell baked goods baked by some of Los Angeles' best bakers. And I look forward to going back to do more work. I also work with other organizations. There's also the Garden School Foundation, and there's other independent schools that are not associated to any nonprofits, and they just have school gardens here, very close to me. Like that's important to me. I wanna see these gardens. Who runs them? Who weeds them? I want to see that.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and if you think about it, like the one thing I think about what's going to change the way we view food and how we assign to it appropriate value is to have future generations have that connection to food. And like a perfect example that I've seen 100 times is you ask a child to eat kale, they may or may not eat it.
yeah.
Have that kid pick that kale, wash it and cut it. He or she will eat it 100%.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
I want to talk about your new book. It is called Mother Grains: Recipes for the Grain Revolution. I've really enjoyed the cookbook very much, and I wanted to ask you, how did you come to write this, and what inspired you?
So for a few years, I would say for the better half of my career, my second act, if you can call it, um, I I've always had an incredibly deep interest in seasonal food. It comes from having grown in the tropics, right, where you have an abundance of fruits and vegetables all the time. And then when I moved here back to Los Angeles, I realized that there is an abundance of food. The only difference is that they change according to short seasons, for the most part. And but the benefit of not having them all year around is that when they are with us, man, are they good. They are so flavor packed, and they really brighten and mark the rhythm of the year. So my cooking, my baking has always been very connected to the seasonality of Southern California. It became pretty obvious in time that grains are an intrinsic part of that seasonality. And once you make that connection, that grains or flour that comes from grains is not just that white stuff that comes in 50-pound bags to your bakery, but rather something that grows on the ground and is harvested and cleaned and um, and put out on a seasonal basis,
Yeah.
then you cannot be interested in it. You
In the last 10 years, we've seen a large amount of emphasis pointed away from cooking with grain to other options. And you're seeing a lot of things in the store, a lot of alternative grains. And I've seen a lot of cookbooks that deal with issues like celiac disease or doing no carb diets. We have the keto diet, and there's so many other types of diets. How influenced were you by that writing this book?
Well, it's amazing. American food culture, right? It's like this kind of like um, ecosystem in which all these like mini diets and mini and large ideas coexist, right? And some cannibalize one another, and then some take over and are predatory and just like um, become almost like mainstream, right? Like this idea that we shouldn't eat that much grain, that grain is going to ruin your gut health, that gluten is very dangerous, or that you should really focus on eating mostly animal protein, and rule out any carbs out of your life. I don't know, like seriously, like if one was to follow, you would go crazy, right? And people do in fact go crazy, and we develop this like very horrific relationships with food, right? Rich country problems, 100%, right? But I would say that the thing about grains and the thing about cooking is that they form part of, like, it's just yet another chapter in this sort of, I don't want to say trend because it's not, but it's this like subculture slash culture, because maybe it's not so sub, in which we are advocating for cooking our own food and favoring foods that are whole, right? That are grown sustainably and in a just way, that don't get farmers sick, that don't employ illegal labor or labor that is mistreated, because let's not cross that bridge of illegal labor. But um, uh, and also like foods that have a lesser eco footprint, and foods that are relevant for seed saving and that are sort of encouraging the agriculture of more that biodiversity, right? So whether the customer knows it or not, anytime you buy this heirloom wheat varieties, right, you are encouraging an industry in agriculture that is not getting subsidies from the government, that they are not getting huge investments from Wall Street. So we are supporting a very, very staunch group of growers, manufacturers, retailers that want to promote the consumption of these products in our life. So I don't want to say it's a trend, and I also don't want to say that we're discovering something. It's almost like we are rediscovering, right? Like it has always been here. It's such a part of who we are. It's sort of like learning that you had this sort of like crazy creative inventor uncle that nobody introduced you to. Like this is part of your DNA. You know, at the end of the day, we're cooking because we want to eat delicious food. We bake because we want something delicious and pretty and fulfilling, right? And the focus of everything beyond any costs, beyond any food security concerns. At the end of the day, we bake and we cook because we want to feed ourselves something delicious. So flavor has to be very, very important. And, you know, these grains may sound weird and they do have interesting textures and flavors that are not what we're accustomed to. But at the end of the day, when put in practice and when incorporated into our cooking and baking, they produce delicious results.
One of the things I really loved about Mother Grains was how accessible the recipes were. Everything in it was designed to be fairly normal. There was no surprises or avant-garde creations in it. Everything was something that anybody would make. Muffins, scones, breads, all of it was stuff in your most people's repertoire. But you made it with grains that were not always accessible or normally used. And you made it very nice and very usable. So is this the design that you had when you created the cookbook?
Yeah, for sure. And this is like the approach that we have at the bakery. We want to make all this like time-honored goods, you know? Yeah, we wanted to make croissants and we wanted to make chocolate chip cookies and we want to make loaves of bread. The one thing that we want to do different is make the flour in them that much better. Make choices that really, really benefit the flavor of the final product, while at the same time fulfilling all the sustainability and food security and food justice goals that I have ingrained in my head and in my heart. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we just wanted to put out really, really great food. And I don't want to preach to anybody that comes to my bakery. I had all kinds of spiels ready when we first opened, to how I was going to explain to people why I have buckwheat in my banana bread and Sonora wheat in my croissants. And I have never, ever had to explain anything to anyone, because at the end of the day, we just want good food. And that's what we do. It's just that we have chosen this flour that we find to be very interesting.
I think as an example, I used buckwheat to make the buckwheat banana bread in your book, and I found it to be phenomenal. I don't think I would ever make it any other way again. It just seems so synonymous with each other and so perfect.
It would be impossible. Or it's kind of like once you make a good muffin with spelt, so easy. I mean, and spelt is also one of those grains that has really, really made a headway into our food system. So you can find it in regular grocery stores. So once you've made a muffin with spelt, it's kind of like, seems like, why would you not do it again and again and again? You know, it works, it's delicious, affordable, it checks all the boxes. And that's what Mother Grains was all about. It's like, how do we look at these ingredients in a different way? They have always been around. We're just looking at them differently. We're learning about some other ingredients that we're not very familiar with, such as sorghum, right? I'm still learning about sorghum. Even after doing all the research I did for the cookbook, I want to do some more. It's such a promising ingredient, but that's exactly what the book is about, what my bakery is about. We're just looking at this normal everyday things in a whole different way.
Before we go, I want to ask you one last question. This is always a fun one. If you could invite up to 10 people from history or from your current life to a dinner party, and it could be anybody, famous or non, and you could cook anything you like, who would you invite and what would you serve?
Well, my grandparents, all of them actually, died when I was relatively young. And my grandmother, with whom I spent, I think I was 6 when she died, like left such a mark on my psyche. I would definitely think that I want to see all of my grandparents there. Including my paternal grandmother, who I've been told by my aunts that we have a very similar personality. I thought that would be fun to see why people say that. I think I would love, I mean, like, I guess, of course, why not? I would love to talk to Julia Child. I would love to talk to, I mean, if she would come, I don't know. If she would come. I also really, like, one of my favorite authors is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who died a few years ago, about 10 years ago. I read everything he ever wrote in press or in fiction. And I know for a fact that he was very fond of eating and cooking. So I think he would be good company. I also would love to see some friends that have perished in recent years that were all about food and cooking and dinner parties and all that.
Roxana, I want to thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to talk to me. Your recipes in your cookbook are phenomenal, and I really enjoyed it very much, and I plan on using it very much in the future.
Thank you. This was such a fun experience.
Thank you. Okay. I want to thank you for joining us today with my conversation with Roxana Jullapat, author of Mother Grains, Recipes for a Grain Revolution. I can't emphasize how much I think this is an important cookbook, and I think that if you go out right now and buy it, you'll love it, and you'll use it, and you'll come to enjoy it and love it as much as I do. Please tune in next week. I had a wonderful conversation with author of the Necronom Nom Nom, Mike Slater, who also runs Red Duke Games. He is a game creator and author of the Necronom Nom Nom, which is a cookbook that is based off of the writings and the mythos of the H.P. Lovecraft. It's a fun cookbook that has actually really credible, wonderful recipes in it and drinks, and I think you'd love it. Please tune in for the conversation. I really enjoyed talking with Mike. Thank you, and see you next week, and keep cooking.